All right, so we are supposed to talk about volunteering for our kids, which, woohoo, kind of how you have to work homeschool. It just is. Because, and honestly, in public school, it's the same thing for the most part. I mean, they hire coaches and things like that, but the for if you're on the football team in a public school, you're working the concession stand. If you're on a band camp or a band in a band, parents are doing stuff to help. And at the very least, they're helping you with fundraising, which is another thing that you have to do in homeschooling because that's just how it is with any kind of group that you have. If you want to do something fun, you got to fundraise. So with homeschooling, it's a little bit more involved simply because you have to do everything pretty much. Sometimes you can find groups that you really like that you can put your kids into, but for the most part, even those things that are already done, they want you there to help. What's it called? I want you there to help keep an eye on all the kids, to make sure that nothing happens to the place that we're in, so that you don't get in trouble for damages. So that the kids themselves. Now, I will say homeschool kids are pretty good about listening to other people's parents or other kids' parents for the most part. But there's always those couple, and it's just easier. We were on the board of a group for a long time, and it's just easier to ask the parents to come and stay, because then those kids that are problems, the parents can handle, because nobody wants to handle somebody else's kid if they can help it. They really don't. And it's kind of looked down on in society to start with, to call somebody else's kid out for something, unless you're like super close with the parents. So with homeschooling, you're going to need to volunteer, whether it's just volunteering to make sure that everybody's cool, nobody gets hurt, that sort of thing, or it's volunteering to lead. I always found volunteering to lead to be a lot more fun, but I like to be second in command so that somebody else takes on most of the stuff and then I help where they need me. And so that seemed to be a really good role for me as I did it. But sometimes you have to take, if you want something to happen for your kids, you have to be the one to start it. And it helps if you have a number of people that are as excited about something as you are, and you can start it as a group. It's a lot more fun that way. But sometimes you just have to be the one to say, okay, I'm going to commit to this. I will do this. And I always insisted, if I was going to do something like that, I always insisted that I get carte blanche. Because if I'm going to start something, I want it done my way. And I'll be happy to have helpers. And if they come in and they want to do something a little bit different, that's fine. But I don't want an organization telling me that I can't do something or I can do something if they're not involved in the day-to-day of it, because it just gets too crazy. Lights. So,
sorry, I realized I forgot to turn back on the light.
So yeah, I was always involved with my kids' things, and I always tried to volunteer. It does get you out of the house. It also helps you as a volunteer. It's a lot easier to meet friends and to meet other people. I found that at church. I found that in groups. My nose is itching like crazy. And if you volunteer for something, you have something in common with somebody else. And a lot of times you have a lot of time to stand around and talk to them. And so it's good, especially when the kids get older, because you can kind of say, okay, well, here's a job. Go do this job and then come back when you're done. When they're little, you're the one doing the job. But with homeschooling, if you can volunteer whatever your kids are doing, it makes life so much easier for the person who has decided that they will be in charge or they will head it up. Because the more hands that you have on deck, the easier things go, the faster things go, and the less work it is. So that's just my opinion on volunteering. You want to make sure that your kids are in good hands and that you're there to help facilitate things.
I agree. Yeah, there is never enough volunteers in the homeschool community. As they, say with most organizations, whenever it's volunteer run, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Um, and that's why I think it's important to volunteer in the homeschool community, because, I mean, you want to make great memories for your kids. You want them to be able to learn more things, have more things, academically, enrichment wise. And the only way that they get those is if someone steps up to do them. And my kids were always like, no, Mom, you're not allowed. But because I have a habit of volunteering for things. And finally, one day, my husband actually sat me down and he's like, use me as an excuse, because I had gotten so super stretched thin that I was like, I don't even have time to homeschool anymore. I'm running 5 different directions. And at this time, all 3 of my kids were still at home. I had 2 at co-op, 1 still needed to be homeschooled, but I was teaching a class at co-op, 2 classes. I was helping with 2 classes at co-op. And so I was having to be there. And so my oldest son was actually making sure my daughter was getting her work done while I took the middle son to co-op. And he would have to bring her up. And then I would take one home and then the other one would come home. And it got to be too much. And my husband sat me down. He's like, look, like your first answer needs to be no. He's like, your first answer needs to be, let me check with my husband and I will get back to you. So that, not necessarily no, but let me check with my husband and get back to you. Because I am, as we went over learning styles and teaching styles yesterday, I am the sociable Sam, and I am, let's do it. Let's have more fun, more outings. The more stuff we can get involved in, the better. And it's not always better because your kids need you as well. But not to say that pick some things that your kids really like and that they want to get involved in, and then volunteer your time. You're going to have to be there anyway, or you're going to have to be dropping off and picking up. And a lot of times there's not enough time to get all the way back home and then come back. So you're going to sit there, whether you sit in your car on Facebook or Instagram, or you're sitting there in your car and you read a book, or you sit there in the corner while everything else is going on, and you just try to, be invisible. Or, the other thing is that you could sit there and inadvertently volunteer because you inadvertently add stuff in. And so then you don't know if you're stepping on someone else's toes. So it's best to just go ahead and say, you know what, I'd like to help. How do you need me? Mm-hmm. And I think everybody has different gifts and talents in different areas. And so you don't have to necessarily be a leader or a teacher. You can volunteer to be crowd control. You can volunteer for cleanup. You can volunteer for snacks. There's so many different areas in every homeschool situation that you can volunteer for. Because all areas are helpful, all areas are needed. And I know, like for our homeschool situation a few years ago, the board, we were the only ones that stayed after every dance and cleaned up. Mm-hmm. Every event, it was just that there was 6 of us at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 6 to 8. It wasn't very many people.
Yeah, it was just us that stayed and cleaned up. It was us that were there to set up, and it got tiring, and it got like, okay, I'm glad all you guys could come and suck all the fun out. Don't worry, I've been here 3 hours before, and I'm going to be here for an hour and a half afterwards, sweeping and mopping and throwing away trash and putting everything back where it goes. So volunteering is a definite thing that needs to be done. And then we started student council, as Judy mentioned earlier, and that was a huge help because then we at least had those kids that were volunteering to come and help us get things set up. Because, there's the old saying, and it's actually in the Bible, says many hands make light work. And it is very true. The more people you have getting stuff done, the faster it goes. So instead of you having to show up 3 hours early to set up for an event, you might only have to show up for an hour and a half early, which, gosh, when I started doing proms for our homeschool group, I did not get to see my daughter go off for prom ever. I was not home for her to watch her get dressed, get her hair, go with her to get her hair done or her nails done. Or, I could go with her to get her nails done because we could do that a day ahead of time or 2 days ahead of time. But whenever her friend got here or her date got here, I wasn't here to take their picture. I had to rely on other moms to take my daughter's picture before prom. And that sucks. I'm just going to say, it totally sucks because my daughter doesn't have pictures of her prom in front of our house. I actually called my sister one year and said, can you please come take pictures of Allison? Follow her around wherever she is, because my husband and I were setting up. We had to be there early. And so neither one of us were here for her as she walked down the stairs dressed beautifully, as opening the door for her date, as he comes to the door to pick her up. We missed it all. I have one year, I had happened to come home and change clothes to go back to prom because I was in, workout clothes, whatever, to decorate. And then I ran home and I was running late. And so I happened to see the limo pull up and her friends get out and then take pictures. And so, but then I hightailed it out and I had another mom take pictures. And I said, please send me some. And she never sent me some, but I stole them off Facebook, thank God. But I don't really have pictures of my daughter by herself. They're with the other group. So volunteer, and I think it's really, really important for when your child is a senior to enlist the help of those underclassmen parents, so that at least you can have that time to be with your child for those last moments, because that's the last time they're going to get to do this. I mean, how many of you have dressed up in a formal evening gown-ish since you've been married? I mean, I've done it a couple times because we've been on cruises. Yeah. But really, that's it. I've done it more for proms because I'm always at the prom, so I'm always dressed nice for that. And my husband's always in a tux for that, which is nice. It's nice to see him like that. But if we had more people helping and more people volunteering to get stuff done, then you know what? Maybe we could get that done by noon or by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Then you can go home and you've got 4 or 5 hours before it starts that you can be with your child to help your child get dressed. But again, if you want it to happen, you're going to have to make it happen. If it's an idea that you have, chances are some other parent is having that same idea. You've got to sniff each other out. Find that parent that also wants to host this thing for them or put on this kind of event, and work together with them, and then enlist other parents to help. It got to where it almost was like, okay, so let's hire a maid service or a cleaning service to come in after us. So that means we need to jack up ticket prices to pay for this service because I'd like to get home too, and you don't want it to be that way because parents get burnout. And I can tell you from my kids' perspective, my kids got tired of me not being there whenever stuff started, whenever they were leaving the house or whenever they got home. I was always late. I was either already there and got to see them walk in, which was nice, or I was staying late to clean up. So volunteer, get in there, help the other parents get the work done. Even if your volunteering is for 1 hour or 30 minutes, you don't understand how much that 30 minutes or that 1 hour can mean to the people who are always there, who are always volunteering. It is life-saving and just almost a breath of fresh air. So pick some things that are important to you and important to your family, volunteer for those things, and then always be on the lookout for new volunteers to come in, because you're going to leave. Your kids are going to grow up, your kids are going to graduate, and someone else is going to come have to fill your shoes. So don't be so good at something that you can't leave. That nobody else feels like they can, that you don't feel like anybody else can fill your shoes. You know, my kids have graduated. I am still helping in the homeschool community, and not really because I need to, but it's mostly because I want to. I love coaching cheer. And so I volunteer my time to coach cheer. And I think that as a human, we should volunteer our time if we have that ability anyway. I mean, because there's all kinds of areas in every situation that needs volunteers in. So find something that you're passionate about, volunteer. I still help with the proms. Why? Because I find joy in that. And it's really fun now that my kids aren't going, because then I don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss her getting dressed, or I'm going to miss him, you know, with pictures or whatever. No, I do it now because I enjoy doing it. If I can make, I mean, I know that there's businesses out there where you can, you know, do party decorating or whatever, and event planning. I mean, I've literally thought about doing that because I really, really love it that much. And I'm in a situation where I'm not working. All three of my kids are gone, grown up, out of the house. Um, I have time, and I am lucky enough that I've been able to have time to do that. And so that's just one way that I feel like, I mean, I can still pour into the homeschool community and still help them to get things, facilitate things that they would like to have for their kids. And then, you know, I am backing out of stuff. I'm no longer, this was my last year to host graduation. I'm not going to do graduation anymore for a homeschool group. They already know that. I've already told them. I really don't want to do prom anymore, but I might do next year just because we didn't get to have one this year. So, you know, but there are things, but I'm also looking for people, for other moms that are coming in that are like good at stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I have the idea. If you want to run with this, I am fine with that. So, you know, use your gifts and your talents. Use those things that your kids are already involved in that you don't have time to run home. Volunteer your time. And as I said before, if you want it to happen, chances are there's another parent out there that also wants it. So find each other, put it out there in the World Wide Web, cyber, or whatever. You know, I know that's an old term. Don't let Reagan laugh at me for that. You know, on the interwebs, and ask, hey, would anybody be interested in helping me do this for the homeschool group? Chances are you'll find somebody else that would like to help you. And so volunteering is it's fulfilling to you as a person, or to me as a person. Maybe I shouldn't speak for everybody. For me as a person, it's fulfilling to me because I feel like I am giving back into something that gave me and my kids something that we loved and cherished while we were in it. And so, you know, I'm not trying to hang on to my homeschool years, because believe me, let me tell you, it is really nice when your kids graduate and you don't have to worry about that anymore. It is. I love it just being me, myself, and I just have to be mad at me because I'm not doing my schoolwork because I'm in school right now. So I only have to, you know, get on to myself. But it is, it's just, I just find joy in it. And so if you can find joy in something that you can volunteer for, and especially if it has to do with your kids, man, go for it, jump in. And then while you're there, start looking for other parents who are always attending what you're doing, who are always, you know, kind of on the fringes of kind of going, well, you know, I could do that. You could. Come here, I got a job for you. So So that's my spiel about volunteering. Just jump in.
And there's always people like Stacy who they jump in with both feet and they are in charge of it. And if you are new to something and you love it and your kids absolutely love it, keep in mind that there's a good chance that whoever's running it right now is burnt out, because it's harder to find people who are willing to volunteer. And that if they burn out and or their children decide they don't want to do it anymore, that event or that thing goes away, because unless there's somebody to jump in their spot, then that goes away. So the best thing to do is, come and help them, learn how to do it. And even if you learn how to do it and you don't want to do it, if that person decides to step down, sometimes you can step in for a short period of time. Sometimes you can find somebody who is like Stacy, who wants to volunteer and loves doing that stuff, and you can help them so that they can do it more easily. And yeah, I know.
And another crazy person. Find your crazies.
There are crazies out there, and I'm one of them, unfortunately. But and it's hard to start something up, but it's not nearly as hard to take over something that somebody has already started and has already got going. You do need to be aware of the people that are there. If you go to homeschool stuff and you see this same person who seems to be doing everything, keep in mind that that person is doing that because it's their heart. They want to do that for their kids, but they don't necessarily want to be doing everything. And they just don't see somebody that they can pass it to yet. And so if you're that person, go talk to them, say, hey, you need help with this? Do you need help with this? And sometimes you can get 2 or 3 people on a committee to do something that one person was handling before, because that person was a superwoman, and the next couple of people are not interested in being superwomen. But if you can get 2 or 3 of them out there that are doing it, then the same amount of work will get done. And you can still have that thing going for your kids. You can still have the proms. You can still have the graduation ceremonies. You can still have the different things that homeschooling wants, so that we don't miss for our kids, but requires somebody to volunteer.
Yeah, and I know that the saying is people like to be asked to help, and it's true. Everybody wants to feel wanted,
Right.
But I think sometimes in the homeschool community, I know for me, and I'm pretty sure I can speak for Judy on this, and probably the rest of our board that was doing all this at once, at one time, was, we're so busy, we don't have time to go ask. We would rather you just walk up and say, do you mind if I go grab that broom? Heck yes, go grab that broom. Can I go clean the bathrooms for you? Yes, please go get that done for me, because that just means I get to get out earlier. And so, I think that, we would usually put a call out for volunteers, and we would get a few, and they would volunteer for 1 event or 2 events, and then they kind of disappear. So, sometimes you just have to step up and just say, I'm here, what can I do?
And even if it's just like, I never like to set up for things. I always like to clean up after, because I would rather stay at the end and get everything done than try and get there early, which I am not an early person. And neither were my children. So I would always say, I might not get there to begin with and set up the tables for the drinks and the snacky poos, but I would be there with the broom at the end. And even if we had to be somewhere afterwards, I would be the one that was like, okay, kids, let's go get that bathroom cleaned up before we leave. Or let's go put all these tables. And I would utilize, in fact, at one point, I think the person who was in charge of, might have been you, who was in charge of the dances and stuff, was like, okay, before the last song, we're going to have a cleanup moment, because people would bugger out halfway through that last song.
Yep.
And they would stay to the end of the dance, but then you're left with 2 or 3 people to help clean up. And it's not cool.
My husband started implementing that at every dance. Two songs before the end, he'd be like, stop the music. We're having cleanup time. Run around, pick up trash. Let's do this real quick to make it easy before we leave. And then we'd come back, dance 2 more songs, and then we could.
And then they go, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, if you're doing dances for teenagers, it is so much help to have those teenagers. And when you're doing homeschool events and things like that, you got to know that the space that you're in is usually, if it's not rented, it's free. And that means that you need to leave it clean. And a lot of times you need to leave it cleaner than you left it. Otherwise the people won't let you come back. Mm-hmm. So homeschool kids are kind of used to cleaning up after events and making sure that things get done, or at least a lot of them are. And so if you can get to snag them before they're ready to leave, then it's a little bit easier to get stuff done. So but that worked out really well for us when we started drafting people before the end, before they buggered out. But you know, and you don't want to have, you know, all these kids, it's their time having fun, but you know, they made the mess. So
right. And literally we would just like pause the music for like 3 or 4 minutes and just be like, everybody run around and pick up trash, do something real quick. You know, because that was the problem, is that, you know, the dance ended at 10, at 9:59, everybody was gone. Yeah. Or the other thing that always happens is the dance ends at 10 p.m., 10:15, people are still standing around talking, and you're like trying to sweep around them, and you're like, excuse me, we need to pick up these chairs, I need that chair. And so it's just easier and better if you're just like, hey, 5-minute cleanup, let's go put all those chairs away, let's get this done, let's end on a high note of the last 2 dances, and let's get out.
Yeah, and Stacy was too nice to talk to the people who were standing around. She'd just sweep around. I made him move and I made him go get a broom. But it takes certain personality types to be willing to do that. And that's the same thing with being asked. Some people are afraid to ask because they don't want to imposition you. And I was not that person. I am willing to ask. And Kathy knows. I asked her a lot. And so it's one of those things where you just want to make sure that you are doing your part because your kids are partaking. And especially if it's something that's free, it's really helpful if you volunteer.
And volunteer early, because I think the other hard thing is that which I had a lot, is that all of a sudden somebody would show up and I'm in the middle of doing whatever I'm doing and I've already delegated jobs, and then they show up without, oh, okay. And they're like, what can I do to help? And I'm like, I've already delegated every job. Right. What can I have them do right now that's not going to make them feel like they wasted their time? And so that's a hard thing too. So ask ahead of time. You know, if you're going to show up early and to help, call the person and let them know, hey, I'm coming, or message, whatever, text, DM, whatever, and let them know, hey, I'm coming. I'll be there at this time or around this time. So that way you can be thinking, the leader can be thinking in the back of their head, you know what, they're coming, and whenever they get here, I'm going to have them blow up balloons. You know, instead of saying, well, gosh, I got this person on that already, I've got this person on that. Really, the only thing left to do is my job. And if I give them that, then I look like I'm standing around doing nothing. So, you know, that gets touchy. So just volunteer early.